Hi everybody, it's Dave the Red Pill Coach, and I'm back this week to tell you guys about the real meaning of Thanksgiving. Now I know we've all gone to school, we've all had our times where we've learned a few things, and we've all been propagandized mercilessly because they don't teach the real meaning of Thanksgiving anymore. But you're going to learn that today, and I hope that you do this around your family table and you explain to all your guests what is meant by the true meaning of Thanksgiving. So, let's get started. This is related to a Gottman concept, and that concept is shared meaning. The idea being that we need to create things in our life, our married life together, that we can talk about, that we can laugh at, we can make private jokes about. Shared meaning. So this is an example of that. The first Thanksgiving. But before we get to the first Thanksgiving, we need to go back in time a little bit to see who it was involved. We had, now if you recall, we had a little ship called the Mayflower. And the Mayflower had about 102 passengers on board. 40 of them were pilgrims, and the rest were Christians of other varieties. So on the voyage over to the New World, they signed a document called the Mayflower Compact. And when you can Google it, you can look it up. It basically says, hey, we're all Christian men, we're all servants of the king, and we're going to set up a governing thing in the New World. And by the way, we're not going to discriminate against each other based on our religion, because they were different religions. So, it sounds good. It sounds like a great document, and it's a good start, but there was a problem, because in addition to the Mayflower Compact, see, these were not government adventures. These were private companies that were funding these expeditions. And specifically the Chesapeake Bay Company had funded the Mayflower and wanted to start a colony and siphon off some of the profits. And their idea on how to do that, see if you recognize how this works. We're going to put everything in a warehouse. Everyone's going to work the field, the communal fields, and we're all going to put our product in the warehouse, and then when winter comes, we're all going to distribute it. And everyone in the colony gets an equal portion. Sounds fair, right? That's cool. Wow, that sounds like a great system. It's fair. Everyone gets an equal amount. Nobody goes hungry. It's going to be great. It's going to be nirvana. It's going to be heaven on earth, right? Well, if you know the story, they didn't do all right. And why didn't they do all right? Well, it's because communism fails wherever and whenever it's tried. Okay? You look at all the migrant caravans coming in right now, right? These migrant caravans, these are Mayans. These are Mayans. These are people who haven't done anything, who haven't built anything in 2,000 years, who live in one of the most fertile areas in the world. Okay? They have a growing season that lasts all year round practically. In fact, I think it does last all year round. In Michigan, we got one growing season. Okay? We plant. Sometimes we get 2 crops out of one growing season, but we make do. Right? We make do. Well, the Mayans apparently can't make do with their incredibly fertile land with ample rainfall, so they want to come here. You know, my question is, why don't they grab a wooden shovel and dig out the roots one at a time? You know why? Because it's back-breaking, difficult work, folks. But that is what the Pilgrims did. That's what all this cultivated land we have, that's how it was done. Most of it, folks, was dug out by hand using wooden shovels. And so we have a system that was set up. It's a communist system. We're all going to work, and it's going to be great. And you know the second part of the story. Because winter came, and it turns out that they didn't produce as much as they thought they would. Now, once again, I disrespected the Mayans by saying they live in a really fertile area and they're idiots for not being able to make a go of it there. Well, the colonists were idiots too, because they landed in Chesapeake Bay, which is, I've been to Chesapeake Bay, it's the greenest, most fertile place in the entire planet. You can You could practically stick your hand in the water and pull out a fish. I mean, there are deer running everywhere. There's wild animals, there's birds. To starve to death in a place with that level of bounty is really, you really got to have a crappy system in place. And they did. They had a crappy system in place. They had a communist system in place, and they couldn't produce enough to feed themselves. And after that first winter, over half of the 101, 102 colonists were dead, including the leader's wife, William Bradford. And William Bradford said, well, gee, this isn't working. We can't even grow enough food to survive. We got to change our system. And that, my friends, is smart. You look at Venezuela, they've been cranking this socialist thing. It'll work next year. It'll work next year. It only took 1 year. That's one reason America is such a great country, because we learn from our mistakes. If something doesn't work, we say, well, okay, we're not too proud. Let's try something else. Okay? Great. Let's try something else. And that's what they did. But why did they have to try something else? Why did they have to try something else? Let me read you what the leader, Mr. Bradford, William Bradford, wrote. This is what happens when you hold everything in commune. The experience that was had in this common course and condition, that by taking away property and bringing community into a commonwealth, was thought to make them happy and flourishing, as if they were wiser than God. For this community, so far as it was found to breed much confusion and discontent and retard much employment that would have been to their benefit and comfort. Listen carefully. Retarded much employment that would have been to their benefit and comfort. Because young men that were most able and fit for labor and service did repine. In other words, they laid down. They laid down that they should spend time and strength to work for other men's wives and children without recompense. That was thought injustice. So what did they do? They held things in common and nobody worked. It's the exact same thing we see hundreds of years later. About 400 years later, we had the Soviet Union developed, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. And they had a joke that they told. The workers would say, yeah, we pretend to go to work and the party pretends to pay us. So in a communist system, when things are held in common, people don't work. Why should they work? Why should I pick up the common area when it's just going to get trashed again by somebody else? This is known as the tragedy of the commons. It's well known. Any economist other than, I guess, Javier Ocasio-Cortez probably doesn't know this, even though she's got a degree in economics from a Ivy League school. But any economist who knows anything knows about this unalterable rule of human nature. If you take away the incentive to work, the people aren't going to work. And this is why, year after year, time after time, culture after culture, when communism is tried, it always ends in death, starvation, brutality, slaughter. It always ends with hundreds, thousands, and maybe even millions dead, often of starvation, because the system of holding things in common does not work. In other words, saying everyone gets an equal share no matter what you do does not work. What does work? Well, what they did is they divided the land up into farmland, into plots, and they gave a different plot to each family. And now, the first thing the settlers did when they landed, they didn't plant food. No, too busy for that. First thing they did was they built a fort, a common fort, for their defense against the evil Indians that were going to attack them. And then the second thing they did is they built a granary. And then by that time it was late in the growing season, and then they started trying to figure out how to grow stuff. And it was too late. It was not only too late, the people weren't working because everything was held in common. So winter came around and over half of these people died. So the following year, they split the land up along family lines and people worked the land. And a weird thing happened. Okay? Because we always hear Thanksgiving is about the Indians, and it is. Because the Indians were the ones who showed the settlers how to grow the food. But note, when they were in commune, hidden behind their fortress walls, guess what? They didn't talk to their neighbors. The community didn't have any reason to talk to their neighbors. But when they split it up, and this guy worked here, this guy worked here, this guy worked here, then all of a sudden you started to interact with your neighbors. So a couple Indians might have walked by and they said, hey, hi, come on over, and shared a pipe or shared some food with them, and then the Indians showed them, hey, by the way, it's probably better to catch a fish first and bury the damn thing before you plant, because it fertilizes it. Oh, well, great idea. But you know the end of the story, folks. The long and short of this is that after they got rid of communism, the following year, they were able to make America great again. It didn't take long. Just like Obama said, these jobs are gone, they're never coming back. It only took Trump, 6 months to get a lot of these manufacturing jobs back? It doesn't take long, folks. When you adopt a reasonable, rational system, and when you get away from the idea of communal property and you then institute the idea of private property. Private property. So that, folks, is the story of the first Thanksgiving. They were giving thanks to God and the Creator for showing them a system, an economic and governing system that worked, after realizing that their old system didn't work. So the story of Thanksgiving is a warning that communism, socialism, shared property doesn't work. And if you think it's going to work, chances are it's going to lead instead to mass death and mass slaughter. Stefan Molyneux, my brother, made a statement, and it really resonated with me. He said, a lot of people have tried a lot of different ways of governing. And sometimes you try a way and it works, and sometimes you try a way and a lot of people get killed. And that's kind of nature's way. That's nature's way. That's God's way of saying, don't do that. Bad stuff happens when you try that. And that's the story of Thanksgiving, folks. It's a story of capitalism. It's a story of private property. It's a story of giving thanks to God for opening up our system so that we can talk to our neighbors, so that we can learn from them, and so that we can produce a bountiful harvest. So go forth, create your own family traditions. This is a tradition where I tell this story just as we're getting ready to dig in to the meal, right before we say the prayer. Just before we say the prayer. Oh, wait. I have to tell the true story of Thanksgiving first. And everyone goes, oh no, not again. But my family knows it, and now you know it too. So go forth and take that information and use it wisely. Thank you very much, and have a great and happy Thanksgiving, folks.